The countdown has restarted, and this time the clock is shorter than ever. Just hours before American bombers were set to return to Iranian skies, President Donald Trump pulled back from the edge. But only barely. Behind closed doors, according to U.S. officials briefed on the matter, Tehran has been given a window of just 3 to 5 days. Not weeks, not months. Days. To do what Iran has not been able to do since its supreme leader was killed in a joint American-Israeli strike. Speak with one voice. What happens in that window could determine whether the Middle East slides into full-scale war. Let's go back to the beginning and lay out exactly where we are. On February 28th, in what open-source analysts and Western intelligence sources confirm as the most dramatic single military operation of the 21st century, a joint U.S.-Israeli strike killed Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. The Iranian regime, the political architecture that had governed the country for over 4 decades, was effectively decapitated overnight. In the weeks that followed, a fragile ceasefire framework emerged, brokered by Pakistan. On April 7th, a 2-week halt to hostilities took effect. The U.S. naval blockade of Iranian ports in the Strait of Hormuz remained in place. Iran briefly reopened the strait on April 17th, then closed it again the following day, calling the blockade a violation of the ceasefire's spirit. Tensions ratcheted back up almost immediately. By Tuesday morning, Trump told reporters directly, without hesitation, that he expected to be bombing Iran again. The original ceasefire was hours from expiring. Then came the call. Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Army Chief Field Marshal Asim Munir personally asked Trump to hold. Trump agreed, but only just. In a post on Truth Social, he cited Iran's seriously fractured government and directed U.S. forces to maintain the blockade and remain, in his words, ready and able. 3 U.S. officials told Axios what wasn't in that public statement. The real deadline is 3 to 5 days. It is not, one official said, going to be open-ended. Let's talk about what ready and able actually means right now, because the military posture surrounding Iran is unlike anything we've seen in decades. The U.S. naval blockade in the Strait of Hormuz remains one of the most strategically significant choke points on Earth. Roughly 20% of the world's traded oil passes through this narrow waterway, at its tightest, just 21 miles wide. By sealing Iranian port access, Washington has effectively cut off Tehran's primary economic lifeline. Oil revenues, weapons transfers, humanitarian imports, all of it runs through or depends on that strait. For Iran, it is existential pressure. Meanwhile, U.S. carrier strike groups and Air Force assets in the region remain on elevated alert. Reports indicate forward-deployed B-52 strategic bombers and 5th-generation fighter aircraft are within operational range of key Iranian targets. The infrastructure strikes conducted during the initial campaign reportedly hit missile production facilities, IRGC command nodes, and air defense batteries, degrading Iran's ability to retaliate in a sustained way, but not eliminating it entirely. The core negotiating flashpoint, according to senior administration officials, is uranium enrichment. The U.S. proposal reportedly centers on a full handover of Iran's enriched uranium stockpile. Materials that, at the 60 and 84% enrichment levels Iran had accumulated, put the country weeks away from weapons-grade material. In exchange, Washington had offered the unfreezing of approximately $20 billion in Iranian assets. Iranian officials called total handover a, quote, non-starter. And there, the talks stalled. Here is what makes this crisis genuinely unlike any that came before it. Washington may not have a coherent negotiating partner on the other side. Since Khamenei's death, his son Mojtaba has nominally assumed the role of Supreme Leader. But according to Western intelligence officials, Mojtaba has not appeared publicly, and there is credible assessment that he may have been wounded during the fighting. Whether that is true or a deliberate effort to project power while shielding him from another strike remains unclear. What is clear is that Iran's power centers are not aligned. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the most militarily capable and ideologically hardline faction, has its own interests and its own chain of command. The clerical establishment, battered and in shock after losing Khamenei, is deeply fractured between pragmatists willing to negotiate and hardliners who see any concession as surrender. And what remains of the civilian leadership, never fully empowered, even before the strikes, is caught between both camps. Pakistan's Supreme National Security Council said publicly that Iran is currently reviewing the latest U.S. proposals, but has not yet responded. Vice President J.D. Vance's planned trip to Islamabad for a second round of in-person talks was indefinitely shelved after Tehran failed to respond to earlier proposals. U.S. officials, according to the New York Times, simply lacked confidence that Iranian negotiators had been granted authority to actually finalize anything. Think about what that means strategically. You're trying to negotiate a deal with a government that may not be able to make a deal, not because they won't, but because no single faction has the authority to say yes on behalf of all the others. Behind the geopolitical chessboard, real lives hang in the balance. In Tehran and other major Iranian cities, ordinary citizens have been living under the weight of the blockade for weeks. Pharmacies are reporting shortages of imported medications. Fuel prices, already volatile, have spiked. In working-class neighborhoods, families are stretching out dwindling supplies. A mother in a district outside Tehran told journalists she hadn't been able to find a specific heart medication for her elderly father in over 10 days. The strikes themselves, conducted in the initial phase of the campaign, hit industrial and military infrastructure. But no major conflict of this scale leaves civilian infrastructure untouched for long. Power grid disruptions, communications blackouts, and supply chain collapses have compounded the pressure on an already struggling population. And in the wider region, from shipping lanes in the Gulf to markets from Mumbai to Rotterdam, the economic tremors of a potentially expanding conflict are being felt. Insurance premiums for commercial vessels transiting the Gulf have, according to shipping industry reports, climbed to levels not seen since the tanker wars of the 1980s. The stakes here extend far beyond two countries. If Iran fails to present a unified position in the next 3 to 5 days, if the IRGC and the clerical factions cannot agree, if Mojtaba Khamenei cannot or will not show himself and assert authority, Trump has signaled through both public statement and private briefing that military operations will resume. A resumption of strikes would almost certainly be more intense than the first phase. Reports indicate that target packages for a second campaign have already been prepared, with deeper focus on underground enrichment facilities at Fordow and Natanz. The facilities that, according to assessments, would require bunker-busting munitions and sustained air operations to meaningfully degrade. Russia has called for immediate de-escalation. China has offered to host negotiations. Neither has moved the needle. And Israel, which participated in the initial Khamenei strike, remains on elevated alert along its northern and eastern borders, watching to see whether Hezbollah or any remaining Iranian proxy force attempts to open a second front. The global community is watching. The UN Security Council is divided, and somewhere in the tunnels and command bunkers beneath Iranian soil, a fractured regime has to decide, together, what it is willing to give up to survive. 3 to 5 days. That is the window. That is the margin between another round of negotiations and another round of bombs. The question isn't just whether Iran can make a deal. It's whether Iran can make a decision at all. Because a regime without a leader, without consensus, without a unified chain of command, doesn't just struggle to negotiate. It struggles to exist. And if the clock runs out, if Trump's patience expires and the bombers return, what comes next won't just reshape the Middle East. It could reshape the world. Stay with us. We will be tracking this in real time. If you're not subscribed, hit that button now, because the next 72 hours may be the most important 72 hours of the decade.